us, and we are very grateful. We are very grateful just for all our attendees to know that your expertise and experience as a nutritionist with the British Olympic team during, if I'm not wrong, 5 Olympic Games. I think this speaks by itself, but it's not only that, but also the clinical studies, all the background you have. And I think that having you today is going to be amazing for everybody. We had the opportunity to have you live in Madrid, if I'm not wrong, a couple of years ago in Immunofest, in one of our conventions. And I'm pretty sure most people here had the opportunity to listen to you during that presentation. It was fantastic one, and that's why they are really looking forward to listen to you again. And well, thank you very much for joining us, and please go ahead.
Thank you ever so much, Aurelio, for the introduction. It's nice to see you again, and it's always a pleasure for me to do these presentations and engage with the Immunotech crowd. So I'm going to turn my camera off while I do the presentation because I always find it a bit of a distraction seeing myself. So if people don't mind, I'll just turn that off there. So what I've got planned for us is for me to talk for about half an hour. Let me just see if my slides are going to switch over here. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to talk for about half an hour, and then we can take questions afterwards. I'm sure people have got plenty of questions they want to ask, and hopefully we'll generate a few as we walk our way through the presentation. So I'm going to cover a number of Immunotech's products, but first and foremost, because there will be some scientific language involved in the presentation, I thought a good starting point really was to give some explanation and context around oxidative stress. And I think we all have different ways of learning, but I often find that if I can sort of visually picture something, it helps me remember, helps me learn. And I think with oxidative stress, it is a complex topic. I often have to sit down and explain it to athletes and coaches. But I think a really nice way to think about oxidative stress is this seesaw that you see in front of you. On one side of the seesaw, we've got the pro-oxidant. You can think of that as damage. You can use quite simple language. And then on the other side of this seesaw, we've got the antioxidant, the body's defense. And oxidative stress is disturbance in this balance where we've got an increase in the damage or an increase in pro-oxidants. So we can't, or it's very difficult to measure these reactive oxygen species. And what we often measure is sort of downstream footprints, if you like, where these reactive oxygen species have reacted with proteins and lipids inside cells, causing damage. And this was, oxidative stress was first defined back in 1985 as a disturbance in this pro-antioxidant balance. But more recently, as our understanding has increased, we recognize that these reactive oxygen and reactive nitrogen species that used to be called free radicals, but we don't use that terminology anymore, are actually not to be thought of as just detrimental. And what I mean by that is when we have undertake a bout of exercise, there will be a burst of these reactive oxygen species, and they will drive some of the adaptations that come with exercise. So with exercise, we get a small increase in oxidative stress that will then, when we stop exercise, switches off. Now, just to build on the concept of oxidative stress and help you visualize things a little bit further, again, using the seesaw analogy, you can see we've got pro-oxidant on one side and then a whole host of different things that are capable of modifying or influencing that pro-oxidant. And then on the other side of this seesaw, we've got the antioxidant. So what drives the pro-oxidant primarily is, certainly in the context of an athlete, is training, but we can see an increase in oxidative damage with loss of sleep, certainly with illness, with injury, psychological stress, muscle damage, heat, and then of course on the antioxidant side you'll recognize a lot of things there being beneficial for health, training, good source of protein, high quality proteins, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds. All of these can help the body build its own antioxidant enzymes, proteins, but also things like fruits and vegetables contain antioxidant vitamins and phytonutrients. Important concept to kind of remember is the body's always looking to rebalance things, okay? So if we disturb homeostasis through a bout of exercise, or we're under some other stress, be it psychological, the body's going to want to restore and get itself back to an equilibrium, to homeostasis. And this is my last slide on oxidative stress, and all I want to sort of convey here is when we're working with athletes, think of an athlete moving through the training program as this red line that you see, this curve. They go up the curve as the training programs are progressed. There's an increase in oxidative stress, but there's a nice balance between the training and the recovery, such that they adapt appropriately. They continue to see improvements in physiological function, but then there's a sweet spot where there's any more oxidative stress. In other words, if they're overloaded too much, then performance, physiological function starts to decline, and then we start to end up with problems like increased fatigue and inflammation and mitochondrial dysfunction. And what's noteworthy about chronic diseases is there's usually a lot of oxidative stress as part of the pathophysiology of chronic disease. Now, with chronic disease, the oxidative stress is persistent. It doesn't switch off. Whereas exercise, we have a bout of exercise, burst of oxidative stress, we then stop exercising, we rest, the oxidative stress resolves, that switches on a whole host of genes that code for different proteins, that helps our body adapt, and then we're fitter and stronger for the next session. I mean, that's an oversimplification, but hopefully it helps you get the concept. So let's dive into some of the products. I know of no other products, protein products on the market that are as extensively researched as Immunocal is. And indeed, this is how I discovered and came across Immunocal. When I was trawling through the scientific and medical literature, preparing for the Olympic Games in China back in 2008, we were looking for means of optimizing athlete recovery and health where we might look to get an edge. And I stumbled across the Lands paper that was published way back in 1999, and that introduced me to Immunocal. And obviously I reached out to Immunotech, and I've had a working relationship with them ever since and been using the product with athletes. But that early study by Lands showed an increase in physical performance, reduced sensations of fatigue, and importantly, we're taking the Immunocal, an increase in blood and tissue glutathione. I've highlighted some other studies here. In grey there's been a real interest in exploring the role of late that Immunocal might have in protecting against traumatic brain injury. Now, these studies are in animals at present because you wouldn't get ethical approval for causing a traumatic brain injury in a human, but because oxidative stress is part of the pathophysiology of traumatic brain injury, there's a role to be had there for Immunocal in helping protect the brain and helping recovery. I've written some papers myself around unexplained underperformance syndrome, and I've got a slide that will dive into that in a little bit more detail. So that's got some crossover and similarity to chronic fatigue syndrome. And then there's the fact that some interesting studies looking at using proteins that are rich in alpha-lactoalbumin to improve cognitive performance and mood. So just to sort of highlight and give it another light touch, you can see a figure on the right here that has a list of different amino acids, and you can see Immunocal and then compared to a sort of standard whey protein. And what we can easily see is that three particular amino acids stand out as having a much higher content. We've got leucine, which is one of the branch chain amino acids, which is crucially important for switching on protein synthesis, so starting the repair process in the muscle. We've got tryptophan, which is the precursor for serotonin, heavily involved in regulating mood. We see high levels of tryptophan in Immunocal. And then, of course, that we're probably all very familiar with and know there's cysteine and cysteine, the sulfur-rich amino acid, which is the precursor for glutathione. So the fact that Immunocal is undenatured means it has these large proteins that haven't been destroyed by heat. We've got alpha-lactoalbumin, we've got lactoferrin, we've got immunoglobulins. These are excellent for supporting the immune system and in turn increasing tissue glutathione. So I don't know about Spain, but certainly here in the UK, there is an awful lot of press about mental health. The press are always telling us here we have a public health problem with regards to mental health that simply isn't being addressed. And I think it's important to recognise and have some understanding that protein sources that are an excellent source of alpha-lactoalbumin, which Immunocal is, are able to improve mood, reduce stress hormones, raise brain serotonin in those under stress, and indeed improve cognitive performance. And athletes have to battle with a lot of stresses. They have the pressure of competition. They have sometimes, quite often as well, the financial challenges, particularly in the Olympic setup. And indeed, like the rest of us, they have to deal with, family issues, relationships, and all the rest of it. So for me, working with athletes, managing their mental health is important, as well as managing their physical health. Now, over about 10 years ago, we set up a clinic in London. That clinic was based around receiving athletes that had a diagnosis of unexplained underperformance syndrome, which is known elsewhere as overtraining syndrome. We don't use overtraining syndrome in the UK because primarily with athletes, it's often not the training per se that causes the presentation. The key feature of overtraining syndrome and unexplained underperformance syndrome is debilitating fatigue. So it has a lot of similarities with chronic fatigue syndrome. So athletes are unable to undertake their normal training program. Indeed, they can be so fatigued that just performing daily activities can be a real challenge for them. And this carries, a big mental burden. So we set up this clinic where we'd have athletes referred in, they'd be screened for any medical problems to ensure that there was nothing medical going on. And then we would run a battery of physiological tests, screen their diets, go through various questionnaires, do some exercise testing, and then we would reconstruct their training programs and their diet. But a central feature of their rehabilitation program was using Immunocal. We would bring Immunocal or introduce Immunocal into their diets, and we would drastically increase the content of fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds as well to boost that phyto content, which we know is capable of stimulating and upregulating the body's cytoprotective genes and making them more resistant to stress.
Nathan, please, can you speak slowly? It's for the translation.
I'm sorry. Yes.
No problem. It's okay. Thank you very much.
Not at all. I'm so passionate about the area. I find myself
I know. Thank you.
Talking too quickly. I will slow it down. So Immunocal Sport. So Immunocal Sport differs to Immunocal, and it differs because we've got different ingredients added to the product. The three different ingredients that stand out are the beetroot powder, the tart cherry extract, and L-citrulline. So tart cherry extract is an anthocyanin, so it's part of the polyphenol family. So anthocyanins are found in dark red, blue, purple berries. And there's been a lot of interest over the last 15 years studying the impact of these berries and their extracts on muscle recovery in athletes. And it's pretty clear that they help facilitate faster muscle recovery. They can reduce inflammation and reduce oxidative stress and allow the athlete to recover quicker from heavy exercise. The beetroot and the L-citrulline. So beetroot extract, as it sounds, extracted from beetroot. and L-citrulline is an amino acid. Both of these work to increase nitric oxide. What is nitric oxide? Nitric oxide is produced in the body and it causes the blood vessels to dilate. And through dilating blood vessels, you can increase blood flow and oxygen to the working muscle. So by giving somebody beetroot and L-citrulline, you can increase blood flow to working muscle, potentially reduce fatigue, increase energy, allow them to train more effectively, if you like. Now, there's some important points to note here, that this product is for healthy individuals and not those with any chronic disease. And the reason for being, and there's some complex biochemistry, and I'll try and explain it simply, but we all possess this enzyme, endothelial NOS, which stands for endothelial nitric oxide synthase. We all possess this enzyme on our blood vessels. And as I've alluded to, when we're healthy, this enzyme will produce nitric oxide through recycling citrulline. But when we have a lot of inflammation, persistent inflammation in the body, then this enzyme doesn't function properly and produces superoxide, which is a free radical or reactive oxygen species. And so with this enzyme being dysfunctional, we have more superoxide around, which is harmful. And because we've got upregulation of this iNOS, which is an inflammatory version of this enzyme, which produces nitric oxide, you've got the mix of superoxide, nitric oxide producing peroxynitrate, and peroxynitrate is very harmful to cells. Indeed, it's been implicated in causing chronic fatigue syndrome in some cases. So important that this product is only used with those that are fit and healthy, not with anyone with any chronic disease. So I'm very passionate about fish oils. We've used fish oils with athletes for a long period of time. Indeed, we started measuring fatty acids in the blood and red blood cells of athletes over 20 years ago now to try and understand what their fatty acid status is. I'm going to reference the fact that there's a number of companies, Omega Quant is a company we use that will offer this blood testing, send a kit to your house, and you can very easily test your own levels of fish oils and various other fats. So when I talk about fish oils, I'm talking about EPA and DHA. You can see them on the slide here. So these are two long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids that are found predominantly in oily fish. And when we eat them, they're incorporated into every cell within the body. So they have a wide range of effects on our physiology. And if you don't consume fish, you will have very low levels of EPA and DHA. So about 5 years ago, myself and a few colleagues, we went through all the scientific literature over the last sort of 30 years to understand what all the studies were telling us that had been published in athletes, because we wanted to understand what the benefit truly was from giving fish oils to those that are athletic. And indeed, I will add that the benefits are there even more so in those that aren't athletic or aren't well trained, because one of the benefits of exercising regularly is that will increase levels of DHA in your own cells. So through taking a fish oil supplement, we can have a beneficial effect on mood and energy. It's capable of reducing inflammation. TNF alpha is a pro-inflammatory cytokine that fish oils can moderate. The beauty of fish oils is the body can metabolize them into various different compounds that are involved in resolving the inflammatory process. So they help facilitate the resolution of inflammation in the body, which is why there is also a lot of clinical studies exploring their use with many different chronic conditions, from Crohn's disease to arthritis and many others. So in athletes, they're capable of reducing muscle soreness and accelerating the recovery of muscle function post muscle damaging exercise. They're very popular in team sports, used by a lot of professional teams, particularly soccer teams. Capable of improving endurance, interestingly, improving the efficiency of the heart muscle, of how it uses oxygen. They're beneficial to cardiovascular health, and they're capable of improving memory as well. So quite a wide-ranging number of effects. So it can be quite important in some ways to have some understanding of what these fatty acid levels are in our own blood. And a simple blood test can allow us to do that. What's nice about the product from Immunotech as well is that it's very important if you're using a fish oil product that it contains an antioxidant. So they put vitamin E in there to help protect these polyunsaturated fatty acids from being oxidized, which means damaged, altered. It also contains turmeric, which itself is a potent anti-inflammatory, and coenzyme Q10, which acts as an antioxidant in the mitochondria. So a nicely formulated supplement, a very effective one. We've done quite a lot of research with vitamin D over the years, and I think my observations are that people are becoming more and more aware really of the importance of vitamin D in health. Yes, we can get vitamin D through a variety of different foods, but it's difficult to achieve sufficient vitamin D from doing that because our primary source of vitamin D is from sunlight. So in the summer months and late in the spring, our bodies are capable of synthesizing vitamin D from sunlight, from UVB on our skin. That does decline with aging, but we're still capable of synthesizing a lot when we expose our face, our arms and our legs, particularly to the sunshine. But in the winter months, even on sunny days, the sun isn't strong enough and sufficient to allow our skin to produce vitamin D. So it is very beneficial through the winter to take a vitamin D supplement, particularly as well as the winter is the flu and cold season, and is when we're all more susceptible or exposed to more viral and bacterial pathogens. The benefits of preventing vitamin D deficiency are substantial in terms of immune function, reducing our risk of upper respiratory illness and disease burden. So typically allowing our body to clear that infection faster, the symptoms not being as severe if we do pick up an infection. From an exercise perspective, there are lots of vitamin D genes in the muscle, so it plays a role in how the muscle remodels, repairs and adapts to exercise. Interestingly as well, studied vitamin D deficiency, it has a negative effect on mitochondrial function. So if an athlete presents with fatigue, vitamin D is one of many things we will screen them for to ensure they're not deficient, because we know that that can lead to a fatigue presentation. And then I think what everyone's familiar with is the fact that vitamin D is crucial for bone health, for allowing our bones to absorb calcium, remodel and have sufficient strength. The European Food Standards Authority sets 4,000 international units as the upper daily limit, so we don't want to exceed that as a daily dose. I've included one study in here briefly just because I think it's an excellent study, but it nicely captures the impact of, in this particular study, supplementing with vitamin D over a 12-month period. You can see in figure 3 here that they measure the vitamin D at several time points over the year, but the individuals taking the vitamin D supplement don't end up with vitamin D toxicity. There are no vitamin D levels over 150 nanomoles there. But what's important is they selected individuals who are prone to illness and susceptible to infections. And they were able to demonstrate and conclude that vitamin D supplementation reduces symptoms and antibiotic consumption among patients with increased frequency of respiratory tract infections. And indeed, that's our own experience working with athletes. We routinely measure their vitamin D anywhere between 2 or 4 times a year. And we will look to optimize their vitamin D levels to ensure that they are as resistant as they can be to picking up illnesses and fighting them off. Just going to take a drink. So, on to the boosters. So I'm going to talk about both the Greens Immunocal booster and the energy booster. Both of these contain, well, the key ingredient being sulforain, this compound that's derived from broccoli seed extract. It's important to note that these boosters are also a source of dried vegetables, fruits and herbs. I'm going to just reference a few studies. This one particularly has got everyone quite excited in the sports science community. It was only published a few years ago. What's noteworthy about this particular study is it was a very well designed study. So they use what we refer to as a crossover design. So where the athletes took both the glucinolate rich broccoli sprout supplement and they took the placebo. And the study was designed to what's called overreach the athletes, which means induce a significant state of fatigue. The training was designed to stress them considerably, such that they would start to underperform at the end of the study. And what was noteworthy when they were taking the glucinolate rich broccoli sprouts was that the supplement reduced levels of oxidative stress. It increased this protein, this NRF2 protein, which is really important in upregulating the body's antioxidant genes. So it enhanced that process, which served to help protect cells from stress. And it prevented the athletes from developing features of overreaching. So they adapted better to the exercise and therefore their performance was much better as well. So this was really quite a landmark study that had quite a lot of coverage in the exercise community. Another study reasonably recently, this one looking at the effects of using sulforain on muscle recovery. So they took a group of healthy men and they got them to perform a bout of bicep curls that they were unaccustomed to, but particularly focused on the lowering of the weight of the bicep curls. It's called the eccentric exercise. That causes substantially more muscle damage. And you can see in figure A that we've got white bars and black bars. These are displaying levels of muscle damage in the blood, creatine kinase. And you can see the white bars were the controls. They didn't take the sulforain, whereas the black bars are those taking the sulforain, and we see substantially less muscle damage on that product. Also, we see less pain being recorded at day 2 as well. So a noteworthy effect on reducing muscle damage and pain from supplementing for a couple of weeks. And then this study, again using a crossover design, so a very well controlled study, allowing us to draw firmer conclusions from the findings. Healthy men, this time undertaking bench press exercise. They were more accustomed to the exercise. 4 weeks of supplementation, and then there was a washout period before then taking the placebo. So they again took both the supplement and then a period with the placebo. And we can see there was an effect on muscle damage. It was significant at 24 hours. Not nearly as much muscle damage as on the other study because they were more accustomed to the exercise and it wasn't a bout of eccentric exercise, but we're still seeing a noteworthy difference. And then an impact on inflammation as well, reducing the post-exercise inflammatory response. So I often get asked as well around inflammation with exercise. Is it good? Is it bad? Inflammation is the body's natural response to trauma, infection. The body starts the inflammatory process so it can then start the healing process. With exercise, we produce inflammation in response to a bout of exercise. That inflammation is always greater if there's any muscle damage. So for example, playing football where there's a lot of jumping, stopping and starting, running, that causes more muscle damage. Running causes muscle damage. Going for a swim, going cycling, these cause very little muscle damage, but there would still be some inflammation. But as you can see from this figure, the inflammation resolves pretty quickly, 24 hours or so. It's back to normal after the exercise. So if individuals have got a good diet, they're accustomed to the exercise, the inflammation will resolve itself. With athletes or with people who are training every day, and they may have other external stressors, it may be that inflammation starts to build over time, in which case we might want to look to reduce that or manage it. In one of my roles working for Orico, a sports science company, we measure oxidative stress and inflammation in athletes all over the world, a lot in football, and we do it every week so we can track levels of muscle damage and oxidative stress in professional footballers. So the boosters, in addition to being a source of sulforain, as I've alluded to, they contain powder extracts of various fruits and veg as well. And what various different studies have highlighted is that from consuming a fruit and vegetable extract, concentrate, it can have a beneficial effect on the immune system. And it can actually look to reduce symptoms associated with illness. All of these studies, they were carried out in individuals who consumed very little fruits and vegetables, which is an important point worth making. They only consumed around 2 to 3 serves a day. But what was noteworthy is that through consuming a fruit and vegetable concentrate supplement, it was able to have a favorable effect on oxidative stress and reduce cold symptoms and enhance elements of the immune system. I've included this slide in here just to highlight how pertinent, how relevant dietary fruit and vegetables are with regards to managing levels of inflammation in our bodies. This was a study where they got healthy athletes and they restricted their diet for just 2 weeks from fruits and vegetables. They took them down to just 2 serves a day. But it's not uncommon to find athletes that do consume that little fruit and veg, but the vast majority of us, I like to think, consume more. But in this study, in restricting fruits and vegetables to just 2 serves a day, there was a substantial increase in inflammation. You can see with the bars in the figure that both pre-exercise and post-exercise, there's a big change from the black bars to the white bars. And that's demonstrating a marked increase in inflammation, both pre-exercise and post-exercise. Through restricting fruit and veg, our bodies manufacture more inflammation. So fruits and vegetables are vitally important in our health through managing that. And Booster provides additional phytonutrients that can help our body manage inflammation. The orange booster, the energy booster, the primary difference here really is the caffeine content. So it contains caffeine derived from guarana, green coffee bean and green tea, and the caffeine content is around 150 milligrams. So that's the equivalent to sort of double strong espresso. 3 cans of Coca-Cola would give that around about that as an equivalent. So it is quite a strong dose of caffeine. We use caffeine in the sporting environment a lot with athletes. We use it because it's a stimulant, so it can reduce fatigue and allow athletes to train harder. Are we okay? Sorry, didn't know whether someone was asking me a question. So if athletes within their training program have got some hard sessions coming up, we might use caffeine to allow them to push themselves a little bit harder. But it's also caffeine can aid mental performance and concentration. So it can be useful in sports and in daily life where we need to concentrate and maintain focus. But it's important, given the dose, that someone is used to caffeine or has some familiarity with it, giving somebody who has never used caffeine before a large dose can make them feel quite anxious because it will raise their heart rate, and they might feel more increased sensation of sort of being nervous, being anxious, which you don't want on the start line of a race. So when does it make the most sense to use the Solframe booster as a sort of part of a sports training plan? I like to sort of use it as a sort of structure it into the athlete's program. So I will have a look at when they've got periods of heavy exercise, or we know they're going to go through a heavy training block that's designed to really move on their endurance, if you like. So we will want to enhance how they adapt and recover. Or it may indeed an athlete that we know has got additional stress going on in their life, and we want to enhance how they recover and reduce the risk of them becoming excessively fatigued. Or if we know that they're at risk or illness prone, and we want to bolster their immune system through the winter months, then again, it could be a good addition to their training program to help them recover and stay healthy. I think this is my finishing slide, but this is a really important point to bring home, is the additive benefit of combining Immunocal with the booster. This is really important. So Immunocal provides cysteine, the amino acid, that's the building blocks of glutathione, okay? And then through providing the booster, which is a source of sulforaphane, that stimulates our body, stimulates the genes within our cells, within the nucleus, to produce more of these antioxidant genes. And then, of course, if we're consuming glutathione, we've got the building blocks to allow more glutathione to be produced and manufactured. So the two are designed and put together to be complementary. This NRF2 protein that sulforate activates sits in all our cells. It's what's referred to as a transcription factor. And the sulforaphane basically almost acts like a switch, triggers this NRF2 protein that travels to the nucleus, switches on a host of different genes that code for these cytoprotective proteins, of which glutathione is one. And then our body can manufacture more of those genes and adapt. So I have got a couple of questions that were given to me beforehand. So I can work my way through these, and then we can take any other questions that people may have or want to drop into the chat. So first one is, for someone who works out regularly, gym, running, which is more important, energy for the workout or recovery afterward? Good question. I think invariably it's context. So I would say they're both important, but particularly for a workout that may be really intense, a workout that we know is going to has maybe a big anaerobic component, is going to cause more muscle damage, then energy in fueling that session appropriately so we can push ourselves is really important. But likewise, if we're inducing more fatigue and we're creating more muscle damage, we know recovery is crucial. So we need to also ensure that we're consuming something, a protein source that starts the repair process, stimulates the machinery in the muscle and starts that repair, provides leucine and the branched chain amino acids. I would say where energy isn't as important might be an easy aerobic workout, a workout where maybe the intensity is such that you're running or cycling and you can talk to the person next to you. That kind of workout, your body is able to burn fat as an energy source very effectively. It's not particularly stressful on the body. You could do that training session first thing in the morning, maybe take a cup of coffee beforehand. And then I would say the more focus is on the recovery afterwards. That is probably how I'd frame that question. Is the inflammation caused by exercise in a healthy person a good thing or something we should try to reduce? Yeah, I get asked about inflammation a lot, and we spend a lot of time studying inflammation. So inflammation is the body's natural response to infection, trauma, and indeed exercise. So we can support their body, providing good dietary advice, appropriate supplements, fish oils, immunocal, the boosters, to aid the body to resolve that inflammatory process quickly, manage that inflammatory process effectively. But it's important to remember it is a natural response to exercise. We are all going to produce inflammation in our body in response to exercise. The most highly trained athlete in the world will still generate some inflammation in their body in response to exercise. What I will add, someone who's very unaccustomed to the exercise and is starting a new exercise program, they will produce more inflammation because their body is getting exposed to a new stress. They're not adapted to it. And in that instance, providing some additional protein, particularly to help support that repair process, can help them stick with that exercise routine and get into a consistent behavior and habit associated with that exercise. Question 3, why do some people start training more and get sick more often? Probably very much depends on the individual. It might be seasonal in terms of when they may be starting that training, but they may ramp their training up too aggressively. They may not make any new adjustments to their diet. So they are increasing the stress on their body through increasing their training, but they're not making any dietary adjustments to account for that. They're not increasing their protein intake, or they're not increasing their carbohydrate intake if there's a lot more intense sessions associated with that training. And if you read the scientific literature around sports nutrition, they will prescribe nutritional requirements based around different types of training and training load, such that, for example, let's take protein. Non-athlete needs about 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight a day. For the average endurance athlete, you're looking at doubling that to about 1.6 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight a day. For a strength athlete or those involved in, say, team sports, you'd be looking to target around the 2 grams per kilogram of body weight a day. And indeed, I may well go higher if they're under a lot of training stress or in a particular heavy training period. So in my experience, when athletes get referred to me because they've become sort of inverted commas illness prone, and we classify illness prone athletes as those that get 3 or more infections a year, I will work to increase the quality of their diet, fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds. I'll check to see what they're consuming in terms of carbohydrate and fueling, and importantly, I'll check the protein quality and content of the diet and often increase that as well. Question 4 is, for someone who trains 3 to 4 times a week, what kind of nutritional support has the most real impact on their recovery and well-being? I would say the most important things there, hopefully as I alluded to in the presentation, are fruit and veg, nuts and seeds, antioxidants, and sufficient protein. Unless you're pushing yourself really, really hard, if you're just going to the gym and you're doing it to stay, fit and healthy, giving your body a nice aerobic stimulus, bit of weight management, then the priority there really is the protein, the fruits and vegetables, the antioxidants. The energy will usually take care of itself, i.e. the exercise will stimulate your appetite a little bit and you'll accordingly eat a little bit more. But in terms of most important elements, it's the antioxidants and the proteins in my view. How do we know, question 5, how do we know if the body is adapting well to exercise or it's being overloaded? Great question. So I've spent a lot of time researching different approaches and methods to monitoring athletes in their environment, because we want to understand how they're adapting to their training program. Are they on plan or are they starting to slide? And of course, we have access to lots of different technology, but I'll start with some simple approaches. First thing you can do is you can take or measure, capture your resting, waking heart rate. So when you wake up in the morning, take your pulse. If you use an alarm to bring you out of a deep sleep, then give it a few minutes if the alarm's woken you up with a bit of a jolt. But you can take your pulse, have a look what your pulse rate is. If it's up by 8 to 10 beats in a week, you're doing too much. If it jumps up within 24 hours of 5 beats, you might like to ease off a little. But ours we'd use sort of around 8 to 10 beats over the course of a week as a bit of a benchmark. I will make the point that if you're picking up an infection, your heart rate will increase. So it can be a useful warning sign for getting ill, which in turn, if you want to back off any exercise. You can track your mood and well-being. Key feature of doing too much exercise to the point of being overloaded is motivation disappears, your willingness to exercise declines. You're generally not as happy. I mean, these are the presentation that we see with athletes in our underperformance clinic. They generally are more unhappy. They've got loss of motivation. Their body feels more sore. So we would ask these questions on a regular basis with athletes when they're training, so we can capture that information. You can score if there's a training session that you do regularly that's a very consistent training session that you're well adapted to, you could score how hard that was. There's a Borg scale which you can download online, BORG scale 1 to 20. And you can use that scale to rank how hard the exercise session was, and you can use that to guide you over time if it's becoming increasingly hard to do a session that's typically quite easy for you. That's a bit of a red flag. So hopefully there's some useful knowledge. I mean, we measure biomarkers. That's what we do at Orico. So we track a whole host of different biomarkers in the athlete's blood, so we can really be much more objective. But there's a lot of interest in using things like Whoop and different and Aura. So these are rings that will track heart rate. They'll look at heart rate variability, and the technology there is getting quite better at understanding how we respond to stress. They can be quite useful as well. So, gosh, I've talked longer than I thought I would do. That's 50 minutes. So. Well, hopefully I've answered a lot of questions, and it's been useful. More than happy to take more questions if people have any and want to send in any.
Yeah.
I'm just going to have a drink.
Yes. Thank you so much, Nathan. A fantastic and very useful presentation. It's been a pleasure having you here, and I take note the questions. Maybe I can share the question with you.
Yep.
Okay. And then take the answer to the consultants.
Yes.
Okay.
So you'll ask me the question, I'll answer it to you, and then you'll in turn give the response in Spanish. Sounds good.
Perfect. Chicos, voy a anotar las preguntas que hay ahí en el chat y luego se las paso al doctor para que pueda él responderlas y así tenemos las preguntas, porque ya son las 8 menos 10 y yo creo que ya para Nathan ya ha sido suficiente. ¿De acuerdo? Así que thank you so much, Nathan, again. Was a pleasure, this session.
No problem.
Okay, so see you soon. Okay?
See you soon. Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Cheerio.
Thank you.
Gracias,
Bye,
chicos.
everyone.
Gracias, Marco, el
Thank you
intérprete.
so much.
Muchas gracias por
Very
la
much.
sesión.
Thank you. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chao.
Cheerio,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you so much.